When I was a little child, I literally, I don't know if I've ever told this story on this podcast, but I would literally fall asleep listening to one of your Bible study cassette tapes. It was a teaching on the life of David.
You're not the first person who's fallen asleep listening to YouTube.
All right, well, welcome to It's Luskos pastor and evangelist and author, Greg Laurie.
We're so glad you're here. We love you.
Well, I'm just more like we're just friends and we're just family, but I'm glad to be with you guys and love your podcast and the way that God is using both of you. I just saw you on television the other day, and, I just think of Jenny, how, you were always a little quiet and kind of behind the scenes, taking care of all of your children. All of a sudden, you're like a speaker now. You're confident. You're beautiful. Not in that order. You're beautiful. You're confident. You have great things to say. I think, frankly, you're a better communicator than Levi at this point.
Oh,
hands down.
Gosh, that is.
Would you
not
say that
true,
back in the day she was lurking in the shadows? Because the way you had her, she was.
Did I use the word lurk?
No, but it kind of was implied a little bit.
I never felt it was a lurk.
I was in the dark corner with all my offspring.
Levi, she had to raise all of your children while you're running around trying to save the world. Someone has to take care of details.
She's still doing it. She's still doing it. Can you believe we just dropped, at the time we're recording this, we just dropped Olivia off for her sophomore year of high school, first day.
She's gotten so big. She's like, she is a young lady, but it's just amazing how they've all grown up so much. And I was going through my old photos and I sent you this little picture I found of Lenya. She was with Stella and it was just so adorable. And, remembering you have one in heaven as we do. And they're always a part of our family still. They're just not with us here, but one day we'll be with them. Yeah. So, but we love your family and we know you all love each other. And it's always an adventure to be with you because folks, whenever the Luskos come to town, things are going to happen. It's like when they came, it's like, let's go to the fair. Okay. So we go to the fair. Let's go here. Let's go there. These guys are active. They're out there doing all kinds of fun stuff, great stuff with their family. I think what you guys do a really good job of is, and we try to do this with our sons and with our grandchildren, is, we wanted to make ministry engaging and fun for our family. So yes, we did what we are called to do, and we still do, but we would bring them in, we would involve them, and we've had a lot of wild and crazy, exciting adventures together. And I think that opens the kids' hearts up, and then they want that for their life too. And I've certainly seen that with Jonathan, and I saw it with Christopher before the Lord called him home, and I know you're seeing it with your kids. You involve them in what you're doing, and that's fantastic.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you for all that. And thanks for being on here. I want to just, at the very outset, honor you and thank you for your role in our lives.
Yes.
You've been a pastor to us. You've been a friend, a confidant, an example, a role model. When I was a little child, I literally, I don't know if I've ever told this story on this podcast, but I would literally fall asleep listening to one of your Bible study cassette tapes. It was a teaching on the life of David.
You're not the first person who's fallen asleep listening to YouTube.
Walked into that one.
So here's the funny thing, though. Tell them what the
okay. Yeah. Well, let me
key.
finish my serious honor moment. Then you can derange it and make it warped and turn me into a dirty old deviant. But young deviant. I'm middle-aged actually at the moment. But so I was a little kid. My dad he had started a Bible study that kind of turned into a church in Colorado, and he would listen to your tapes as part of his preparation. These were Calvary Chapel Riverside tapes, which dates it because that would be 1980s.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm maybe 5 years old, and I used to always go in and watch my dad study, and he would let me help him look up cross references in his giant concordance. He had a big green concordance, and you look up a verse, and then he would show cross references. This was before Logos. You didn't do this on a computer; it was manual work.
Right.
And no wonder you're so good at studying. You've been doing it for years.
The treasury of scripture knowledge, right? Wow. So he would put these tape cassettes on that he would purchase in the mail and have mailed to him of you teaching like a week later. And I came in and I heard you preaching on David and Goliath. And I love David and Goliath. And the way you taught, I've always loved the way you teach the Bible. It just comes to life. And if people listening have not heard Pastor Greg teach, you just got to go follow him on YouTube, listen to his teachings. He's done so many books of the Bible and stories in the Bible, but I just loved it. And so I remember listening to it. I just sat there in the corner, listening to this whole thing. And then at bedtime, my parents asked what story I wanted to listen to. And I said, I wanted to listen to that Bible study again. So my dad brought that tape into my room. And for, I don't know how many years, I wouldn't go to sleep without listening to this particular tape, which was David, His Calling, Part 2. Listen up, young preachers. This is how you title a sermon. Okay. David, His Calling, worst. Part 2. No, but you know what? It was amazing. And there's something to it.
Yes.
So years later, I started church. Of course, you and I had become friends by then. And I pinched myself every day about that. And I was amazed that I was going to the airport to pick you up to preach at Fresh Life Church, at our church in the building that I'm actually sitting in right now. Which we could talk about that later because the next day everything went off the rails. But when I picked you up from the airport, I brought that tape with me because I thought it was so funny. And in my Chevy Blazer, I had a tape cassette player. And so driving from the airport, I was telling you the story, try not to come on too strong, but and you're like, well, let's listen to it. So we pop it in. And for whatever reason, about a minute into where we played it, you start going from David and Goliath to David and Bathsheba. And it's like a pretty steamy telling of the David and Bathsheba story. Wow. And I remember driving and you turned to me and you go, how old were you when you were listening to this nonsense? And I say, at 5 years old, and you go, no wonder you're so screwed up. That's a direct quote.
That is so great.
There you go. I can't add anything to that.
It's true.
I still have the tape on the shelf in my room, and I do blame you on me being so screwed up. So thank you very much. And on you.
Just trying to do what I can do.
The impact on my heart for God.
That's
and
so special.
It's a great memory. So anyhow, all the lives we've lived together and the things we've done. I mean, it's amazing to see and watch what God's doing through you. The way through the pandemic specifically, you guys have shifted gears and just seen millions of people engage with truth through your Harvest at Home broadcasts. And what's going on right now in your life that's keeping you excited? Well,
we're, as you said, it's just with the COVID situation, it's just pivoting because, first we didn't know what was coming. We didn't know what this was. We went into lockdown. We shut our church down for a few weeks and we opened back up primarily outside. Then we eventually started meeting inside again and everything was returning to normalcy. Now there's a new phase of it. And, so I think what we have decided is, we have to be ready to go whatever direction we need to go to keep doing what we're doing. So it just occurred to me that everyone's looking at these right now, screens, always have been, but maybe more so through the pandemic, binge watching on Netflix or watching endless videos and so forth. So I thought, let's produce content for the people viewing. So we had an online version of our Sunday broadcast, but I went in and did something exclusively for the online viewing audience, which blew up. It went 1 week from 10,000, literally overnight to at our peak. It was 1,300,000 when a certain president tweeted he was going to be watching Harvest at Home.
Wow.
And now we've leveled off to around 300,000 watching on any given weekend. Okay. So we're doing that, but then we're still doing live church. But then we weren't able to do our crusade, so we came up with the idea of a cinematic crusade. And I didn't even know what a cinematic crusade was. I just had to call it something.
I think you kind of invented it.
I needed to take the elements of a crusade and put it on this thing.
Yeah.
And literally not a TV screen, but a phone, because so many people watch content through phones in particular. And so we created this freestanding film called A Rush of Hope. And we ran it around the time we would have had our crusade. We ended up having many more people watch it than would have watched a crusade, many more people coming to Christ. So I've been working on a part 2 to that, working titled Fame. I just was in Arizona earlier this week and I interviewed rock icon Alice Cooper, who's a very strong Christian and has certainly tasted of the fame this world has to offer. At one point of his career, he was the #1 rock star in the world above everybody.
Yeah, there you go.
And so he's been there, done that, bought the t-shirt. And in his case, He's been the T-shirt, but he.
Now, what was the deal with the bat? Did he actually cut the bat's head off? Did you ask about that?
Okay, so that story. So there's a lot of lore surrounding Alice Cooper. So here's what happened. Alice Cooper was in concert with this band. They were just kind of beginning to develop their sound and look. They were trying to stand out and be a little bit different than all the hippie kind of rock that preceded them. So he was sort of the father of kind of glam rock or bands like, Kiss, Twisted Sister, that genre of music. But anyway, so he's on this stage, he's ending a set, and they had this little thing they did where they would take 2 feather pillows and they would open them up and have a fan and spray the feathers on the people. He says they're spraying the feathers on the crowd, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this only happens in rock and roll, someone throws a chicken on the stage, a live chicken. Alice looks at the chicken. He says, well, I wasn't raised on a farm. I figure it's a bird, it'll fly. He picks the chicken up, throws it up. Well, chickens don't fly very well. Chicken lands in the crowd, and for some reason, the people literally tore the poor chicken apart and then threw the parts of its body on the stage. He never bit anything. And then there's a story in the papers the next day, Alice Cooper kills chicken on stage. Well, he didn't kill it, but because it was such a great rock and roll story, he didn't deny it either. And that's how that story started.
Wow.
Oh my gosh.
Well, thank you for setting
like
the record
Levi.
straight.
That's a good story.
Throw a chicken on the stage the next time you preach and see what happens.
I like it. I had a dog wander on stage one time while I was preaching.
And what happened?
Well, everyone in the crowd started laughing, and I didn't know the dog was behind me. And so I'm like, what's the matter? Why is everyone laughing? It was like a serious part of the sermon. And the funniest part was eventually I was like, maybe they're looking behind me. So I went to look, but just before I did, it went to the other side of the stage. So where I looked, it wasn't there. So that made the crowd laugh more. It was a thing. What's the weirdest thing that's ever happened to you preaching?
Well, okay, reminds me of a story involving an animal, but in my case, it was a peacock. So I'm on the North Shore of Oahu preaching. They met outside in this kind of a wild animal park. So some animals wandered about. So I'm in the middle of my message, and I look at the end of the middle aisle, and walking my way is a peacock walking along, and he lets out this peacock sound.
Oh, they're loud.
They sound like a screaming woman. It's sort of like a, and it's really loud. He does it. He gets a little closer, lets out the sound a little closer. Now he stands right in front of me, in front of the stage, and he opens up his tail feathers. Yeah. And everyone starts laughing and applauding. I'm like, what is this peacock doing? And so I make this sound. I go, like I'm shooting it. People were very upset with me because I pretended to have shot the peacock.
You didn't even really shoot it
for real.
Yeah,
if I had a gun, but I didn't.
Wow.
But just the pretending sound of a gun, boom. People got very mad at me. Didn't hear the rest of my sermon.
They walked up and
that peacock
left.
ruined my message.
Honestly. Did people get up and leave?
Wasn't that bad.
Okay,
they're in Oahu. They don't have anywhere to go.
They were frustrated. Yeah, they're landlocked. What are they going to do? Or they're ocean locked. Now I remember you've preached through some pretty, I'm sure, hard physical things. I know you had some really bad vertigo one year going into one of your crusades. You had to hold the pulpit to keep it from the whole world from spinning around you. Yeah. Have there been other really hard times when you had to kind of muster up and soldier on to preach?
Yeah, there have been a few times where I've been sick, but it's a funny thing. When I get up to speak, it's almost like there's this endorphin release. And even more than that, I feel God's Spirit comes upon us. Yeah. And so it almost is a way, frankly, to power through some of my sickness, which is pretty rare. But honestly, there have been times, I wouldn't say I'm depressed. I'm not a depressed person by nature. But let's just say there have been times I wasn't in the mood to preach.
Sure.
But I got up there and did it. And actually, I came in sort of depleted and left replenished and refreshed. But going back to that vertigo thing, I got vertigo. And it's so weird because it's like literally you feel like the room is spinning. We went recently to the fair, and I remember your kids, in fact, Liv, your daughter, went on this crazy ride. She's turned upside down, flipping around. I thought I'd never go on that ride. When I had vertigo, I felt like I was on a ride like that. Oh. And my reality was the room was spinning, but I had the crusade. So I went up to preach, and you're on a very high platform. I literally just held the pulpit in case I fell. But it's funny. I got up there to speak. I didn't really feel the vertigo as long as I preached. And so, but as soon as I was done, it came back again, but it went away. But the hardest time I ever had to preach was only days after Christopher died.
Yeah.
And part of me said, maybe I shouldn't do this. And another part of me said, I must do this. In fact, this is probably the best thing I could do. And it was, but it wasn't easy. And as you were there, Levi, you remember we had, all these screens with art that Christopher had designed. He had this little arrow design, and it was everywhere. And so I'm standing up there surrounded by the art he designed for that campaign, because he's a graphic artist and he was supposed to be there, obviously. And I thought of him and I thought, wow, is he watching from heaven? I don't know that you can say with certainty that people are not aware of what is happening here on earth in heaven. I think, in fact, they may know more than we think they know.
Yeah.
But regardless of that, that was very hard. Yeah. But yet, in a way, it was very therapeutic for me too.
Yeah.
I remember that
vividly. Yeah, I was thinking before we got on about how, I had the honor of giving a eulogy at Christopher's service. And then, of course, you did Linya's funeral and spoke the message that day. And you just never know in life. I mean, just to think of that we would both go through such similar things and be able to be there for each other.
Yeah.
The Bible talks about mourning with those who mourn. But I think a lot about how grateful I am that we had you and Kathy's, footsteps in the snow to follow, watching you get up. I mean, you didn't just get up at the Crusade that summer or at Christopher's service. I mean, you got up the next Sunday at church, and just kind of gave a testimony about, I still believe. And I just remember, and you were one of the first phone calls that we made the night Linya went to heaven. Just, it's just, we're so grateful for the way you went through that. And then we were able to, kind of follow some of the things you taught us and we saw modeled in you after that, pouring yourself into ministry, but not in an unhealthy way, because it can get a little bit to where that kind of just prolongs the grieving, to sort of just shove it all down and, but to actually grieve, but to let that fuel your motivation to do the work.
One of the very few, I don't know if I'd use the phrase good things, but let's just say positive things. One of the very few positive things, because there's very hard things that come with losing a child that are undeniable. And I've never run from that. I've never sought to put a happy face on it. I call it what it was. It was a horrible tragedy for both of us. But we knew that we could glorify God. We know that we'll see our children again. But one of the positive things is I had a desire to help people that lost children. Of course, you are a good friend, so that was natural for us. But, honestly, in the past, if I was, this family just lost a child, can you go visit them? I was really apprehensive to do those things. But now I find myself more willing to walk in where I would have normally walked out. Not because I have all the answers, because I don't. But I can in some way connect to their pain. I have an idea of it. And I think everyone's pain is different. Everyone's, relationship with their child is different. There's a lot of other mitigating factors that can complicate the mourning process, such as if the child took their life. That's a dynamic I didn't deal with. Or, one case, I met a couple, their child was murdered. So these are very, very hard things to deal with. But I think when they can just see someone there that has experienced it and went on with life says a lot. Yeah. And I used to before, when I was, before it happened to me, I would be quicker on the draw with answers. And, I haven't really changed what I would say, but I would say I say it differently now. I would say I listen more now. And I think, like you said already, there's just a time to mourn with those that mourn. When Job heard all the horrible things, all the horrible things happened to Job, his comforters got it right at first when they just came and saw Job and said nothing and mourned for multiple days, just wept with him.
Right.
That's a good thing to do for someone who's hurting.
Yeah.
It's so true. Well, we're so grateful for you. And I even just think of the practical thing of how after Christopher went to heaven, you and Kathy both told us about how this one little tiny devotional called Daily Light was like so helpful for you. And so and then we bought it before even Lenny went to heaven. And
it was the Anne Graham Lotz one, right? It's
Anne Graham Lotz. Yeah. And that night that Lenny went to heaven, it was right there. And it was almost like it's this, for those of you listening, it's this devotional, but it's filled with God's word. And there's like a header of the theme of the verses, but then it's just literally God's word.
And there's some of it you read in the morning and some you read at night.
Yeah. And I mean, that held us, because I think sometimes when you're grieving, you open up the Bible and you're just like, I don't even know where to start. But this was so precious because you open it up and it's just God's word poured into your heart. But what's so powerful about that was that the ripple effect of that through us, like we have given it to so many people. And even just recently, we have friends who are pastors who their daughter went to heaven this year, and they text us multiple times that is helping them. So even just the practicality of that, I think, among all the other things, it's just so amazing.
Yeah, I was thinking when you were talking, Jenny, about sometimes people say, oh, Christians are out of touch with reality. We hide our heads in the sand. The opposite of that is true. Mm-hmm. Christians can take the most difficult subject of all, death, and deal with it head on, unblinking. We're not afraid of it. We don't look forward to death. I don't think anyone loves life more than a Christian. Yeah. But having said that, we can talk openly about it, and death has lost its sting.
Yes.
And, in the ancient documents, they used to write the words memento mori over them. So it might be your bank account, which is growing, and you're looking good on paper. They would write memento mori, which means think of death. Newsflash, you can't take it with you. Mm. And I think that, we can look at these subjects and bring real hope to people who are hurting.
Yes.
And live to tell the story, not turn to drugs, not turn to the bottle, not even sometimes I've heard of people taking their own life when they lost a loved one. And instead we turn to God, and then we want to use it as a tool to help other people. And of course, you guys have done that through your writings, through your book that you wrote about Lenya. And we, as Paul says, we comfort with the comfort we've been comforted with.
Right.
And then there are things that God does in our hearts that are unique. And like what I've said to people is, I wish I could have the things God did in my heart and kind of the change that happened in me, where I was willing to take risks I wasn't willing to take before, and have Christopher there with me.
Yes.
One of those exchanges was Christopher's brother, Jonathan, who's right over here to the right of me. And
hi, Jonathan.
And how Jonathan has just blossomed and grown and is serving the Lord now, and how proud his brother would be or is of him right now. And so this is one of those Romans 8:28 moments.
Yeah.
I don't think one should go to someone who's just lost a child and quote Romans 8:28 up front. But there comes a moment
unless you want to get punched in the teeth. Yeah, right.
That's right.
Yes.
But later you are able to take it and say, despite this tragedy, God has caused all things to work together for good. The verse doesn't say God will make bad things good, because bad things can be bad and stay bad and always be bad. But God can cause all things to work together for good. Despite the bad and the tragedy, good can come. And I've seen that in my life. I know you've seen that in yours.
Yeah.
That's right.
Well, and I think, speaking of, you said Christopher would be or is happy. I remember you were the first person I heard point out that in the parable of the prodigal son and the lost sheep and the lost coin, Jesus 3 times says there's joy in the presence of the angels.
Right.
So that's obviously not angels, it's presence of the angels. So who is it rejoicing over the prodigal son coming home? It's obviously the church there that's waiting for us to be reunited with them.
And even in Hebrews, where it talks about, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, like there's just that picture of like people on the sidelines, like
there's no reason not to think that our loved ones are waiting for us, watching, aware, cheering us on, urging us to live in the light of eternity. So that's so good. Now, you and Kathy have been married. What's the anniversary this year?
Well, it's coming January. It'll be 48 years.
48 years of marriage, which is incredible right there. And 48 years of marriage. having sustained the grief of a child, having, gone to heaven, which, as we both know, usually is a death knell for marriages. So oftentimes that does lead to, I don't think fault lines, I think exposing fault lines, right?
I agree.
But can you talk to just maybe, first of all, the story of how you and Kathy met? And then I definitely would love to get into maybe some of the things you've learned in marriage that, has helped you guys to thrive as you have, because you guys have a very cute, very fun relationship. Fun. And so, yeah, maybe just the story of you and Kathy when you first met. I know you had thick, long, luxurious hair back then. Yeah. Things were different.
I had really nice long hair, parted in the middle, hippie style, past my shoulder. Some guy came up to me the other day. I remember when you had hair down to your back, all the way down to your butt. I'm like, I didn't want to dispute. I was like, never had hair that long.
Never had hair that long.
But yeah. I did have hair down to my shoulders, big full beard. And Kathy, frankly, didn't look dramatically different than she looks right now. If you look at an old photo of Kathy, you recognize her immediately. Where me, I look like a different guy. But so I was speaking at a little Bible study in Long Beach, and I was up on a little stool, and I was giving my message, and I noticed these three girls. Well, those three girls were Kathy, her sister Mary, and her other sister Dodie. They were inseparable. They went around as these three girls everywhere. So afterwards, I went up to them, and I had noticed them, but I noticed Kathy in particular. I wasn't scoping chicks out while I was preaching. Yeah. I just noticed her.
Just to get that off the
Well, there was a light shining down on her. And I realized later it was Dodie holding a flashlight. No, not really. But
was anyway, it an actual light or just that you liked her?
Both.
Okay, gotcha.
Anyway, so she had the spotlight on her.
So afterwards, I said, hey, would you guys like to go out and get coffee? Yeah. So we went out. And I really kind of had eyes for Kathy, but the other girls were there, sisters. And then a couple more times he did it. Then a time after the study, I said, hey, you want to go out and get dessert? And Kathy said, yeah, let me get my sisters. I said, that's okay. Leave the sisters, just you and me. So
you don't need to. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's when we started really talking to each other. And the funny thing, Levi and Jenny, is we argued a lot. I just felt sometimes that Kathy, and she's even admitted to this, would take a contrary point of view just for the heck of it. And I'm like, wait, because I'm very certain I'm saying certain things I think are true. And she would take counterpoint. It's like, wait, what are you taking counterpoint for? And so we would debate these things, and then we would become boyfriend and girlfriend. We'd get in a big argument and we'd literally break up. I don't want to see you anymore. Little time would pass to get back together, get further along in the relationship, breakup. So we had 3 mega breakups. Wow. And after the third one, we realized, I think we're supposed to be together. And Kathy says I never even properly proposed to her. She said we were sitting at dinner, and I turned to her and said, well, I guess we're getting married, huh?
Wow.
That seriously? She says, that's what you said. And I don't have my own version because I don't remember. So I have to go with hers. I said, well, maybe there's something to that because we've been married almost 48 years. But
when you get to 50, you should propose.
Finally do it right.
Give her the proper proposal she never got at 52 years.
What if I get down on one knee and I can't get back up again?
It is what it is. I've seen you do box jumps. You're limber. You'll be fine.
That was a little while ago. I don't know if
Neil,
I can do this
can't
anymore,
get up.
Levi.
Hey, when we went to the fair and hit the hammer on the contest to see who could hit the hammer harder, who won? You or me?
Well, I wasn't going to say anything.
You smoked me.
Because you got it right in the center.
It's technique, Levi. It's not strength.
I'm telling you, you got that old man strength. You just busted that sucker out. You just went for it.
Wow, Levi, let's go.
That's like, okay, what do you call that? Accomplice. That was accomplice sold. Compliment, insult together. Old
I think it's a
man
backhanded
strength.
compliment.
Oh, strength. Old man.
Okay. So what age were you two when you got married?
She was 18 because I had to wait till she was 18.
Yeah.
And I was
so
21.
she didn't have to get a parent or guardian to sign the waiver.
Her dad told me no. I asked his permission. I went over to her home. Her father was a very cultured man, and I was very uncultured youth. And so we're walking around by his pool, and reminds me of a scene from the movie The Graduate almost. If you ever saw that. We're walking around by the pool. I said, well, Mr. Martin, I'm in love with your daughter. He says, yeah, I'm aware of that. And I would like to marry her, and I would like to ask your permission. Very calm guy. He says, Well, Greg, my answer is no. And my response is, well, can I ask why? He says, well, first of all, I don't think you have a real career and you don't make enough money to support my daughter. And of course, Mrs. Martin is concerned because you're not a Catholic, because Kathy's mom, Pilar, was a very devout Catholic. Then I just said, well, Mr. Martin, I understand what you're saying. I'm going to marry your daughter. And so we'll wait till she's 18. So Kathy was devastated because she loved her parents and wanted their approval. And so they just didn't even talk about it. It's almost like this event never happened. She's still living at home. And so she decided to write them a letter. While she's living in their house, she writes a letter. Dear Mommy and Daddy, I love you. I respect you. I wish you would support this. Greg is better than you think he is. We'd love you to be at the wedding, etc. So the letter went out, came back. Her mother came to her a few days later and said, honey, your dad and I read the letter and we'll be at your wedding. So it turned out beautifully, and they were there. And, so yeah, we got started very young. I almost feel like I've been married to 7 different women and counting. Ironically, all named Kathy and all spelling their name the same way. I mean, she's not the same Kathy I married at age 18, and I'm not the same Greg. I mean, we are and we aren't.
Yes.
We change. And I like to say we become more exaggerated versions of ourselves, for better or for worse. This is why I always say to people who are single, don't marry a person and make them your project and think you're going to change them, because they might get worse, okay?
Yeah.
So you have
advice.
to love and accept them as they are. And we both did, and we both do. And, but we say every day, I love you. And, you have to keep the communication open and learn how to, if you have a disagreement, to resolve it. Cliff Barrows, I think you met him, Levi, the longtime associate of Billy Graham, said there are 7 words that you should say to your spouse on a regular basis. I love you, I'm sorry, and please forgive me. And he says you could even add these words for good measure. It was my fault.
Yeah.
I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me. Those words go further than you think they do.
That's so
wow,
good.
that's really
so
good.
helpful.
Now, where does you guys have a very cute, I love you too. The very cute relationship. Why do you call her Monk?
I have no idea. I think it's senility. I've forgotten her name.
You've been calling her Monk for as long as I've known you two.
It's abbreviation for monkey. And it was an affectionate nickname, even though we don't think of that when we think of a monkey. But somehow I started with this nickname, Monkey, and it became Monk. And I don't know why. And now it's just habit. Monk.
It's so funny. Like around the house, like if you can't find something, it's like, where's this thing at, Monk? Like it's just always like, it's like that. It's just a very cute. Does she have a nickname for you?
No, but one time I was doing that and suddenly a monk actually walked in the house. May I help you, my son? No, I didn't mean you. I'm Kathy. Thank you, though. Please.
I never thought of that as a monk, like a brother monk, like from Robin Hood,
like a priest. A priest.
Yeah, like a Friar Tuck.
Friar Tuck.
Oh my gosh.
She doesn't have a nickname for me. No.
We should work up one.
Okay, let's do it.
I mean,
what is it?
My nickname for you is Greg Loria.
Yes, and
because when we were in Greg Loria,
well, you probably should tell that story. Or
my God! Well, we were in South Dakota, and so for those listening, Pastor Greg does these crusades. He's been doing them around the world. We'll talk a little bit about where that all came from and how that started, and your connection to Billy Graham, who is the subject of your newest book. But basically these big events, Dodger Stadium, he's packed out, AT&T Stadium in Dallas, Anaheim Stadium. How many years in a row, except for 2020, the devil year? How many years did you get that?
31 years.
31 years in a row, packing out Angel Stadium in Anaheim, all these things. And I, for years, have been serving with him and hosting and emceeing the events. And we did one in South Dakota. And because, of course, there's such a rich connection in South Dakota to the native people and tribes with, Crazy Horse, the statue being done. Some of the tribes had requested to honor you for coming to participate and do this crusade. And you were so great to honor the tribal elders. And So they did this big ceremony to honor you. And it was just so beautiful. They did song and dance, and then they honored you by putting a headdress on you and then a blanket on your shoulders, which they had knit with. It was just an amazing tradition. I'll never forget it. We also went through this like exhibit where you got to drive through and see all these grizzly bears, and anyhow, but they did a big song, and part of the singing of your song was to sing your name, Greg Loria. And then they were like, anyhow, so I've been calling you Greg Loria forever. For a while, I had it as my ringtone when you called me.
I know.
It was awesome.
I remember Greg Loria. So what's your nickname for me, Jenny? Go.
Oh gosh. Let's see. This would be Kathy's nickname for you, not ours. Greggy Pants.
Wow.
I'm going to stay with Greg Loria, if you don't mind.
Greg Loria.
Well, that's interesting because Levi has nicknames for me.
She calls me like Sassy Pants, or she always puts pants on the end of things. So that's where the context is on Greggy Pants, by the way. But yeah, I have lots of nicknames for her. She doesn't really have any nicknames for me.
What are your nicknames for Jenny?
I call her Juniflower, Juniper, Junie.
You normally call me June.
Juniper Jones. Yeah, all variations on June.
But Levi is a nickname giver.
It's true.
Yes, I am too.
Yeah. I don't know where that comes from. What would psychologists tell us about that?
If you give nicknames,
it's a compliment, right?
I think for me, it's affection. I mock the people I love.
I mock the people I love. That's in the Bible.
It isn't.
The opposite, actually.
Well, it's under the works of the flesh are these, that's there. But
nicknames.
So it is in the Bible in a way, but not necessarily in a positive.
Okay. But how about my second question? 48 years of marriage. What are some of the principles? What are some of the things, or even some of the, you mentioned a natural transition of 7 different versions of you, 7 different versions of your wife, seasons of life. What are some of the things that you've really learned, or maybe some phases that you guys had to go through to get there?
Yeah, I would just say that it's, for, not to use a cliche, but it is a journey. It takes time. It's day by day, week by week, month by month. I think you need to work on keeping your marriage strong and healthy, and don't neglect it. I think the moment you take your hand off the wheel, it's going to veer in the wrong direction. So I think you have to be very intentional. And I think you need to focus on what the Bible actually tells you to do. In the case of husbands, it says, husbands, love your wife as Christ loves the church. That doesn't mean you shouldn't respect your wife, but it means, of course you should, and I think respect is included in love. But it's interesting, it says specifically, love your wife. I think a woman needs to be told by her husband that he loves her. She needs to hear it verbalized. I think that's important. But then it says to the woman, wives, respect your husbands. That's not to say that a wife should not love her husband, because she's told to do that, as a matter of fact. But it does say respect. So, I'm not trying to overly simplify, but women need love and men need respect. And you need to tell a woman you love her. And I think a wife needs to tell her husband she respects him. I appreciate you. Thank you for what you do, that you're consistent, you do these things. And, we're very different. We relate differently. But to me, it's just being with my wife, spending time with my wife. We really do pretty much everything together. And when I'm not with her, I, of course, miss her. And she's my number one counselor. So when I hear bad news, I want to talk with her about it. When I hear good news, I want to tell her about it. When I'm grappling with an issue, I want her to help me work through it, because I respect her opinion. We jokingly say, between the two of us, we have one brain. And there's so many times she goes, what is that one? And I'll remember it. And then I'll say, hey, remember that? And she'll remember it. And it's amazing how our brains together make one functioning brain. And, the Bible says that 2 become 1. God called their name Adam. And, you can't really say the name of one without the other. In the Bible, Adam and Eve, Aquila and Priscilla, Levi and Jenny, it's, Billy and Ruth. Yeah. So these, your names are just melded together, and it's really a beautiful thing. So, I think it's just, you're just in constant maintenance on your marriage. The Bible says, husbands, dwell with your wives according to wisdom. And it doesn't mean just live with your wife, but it means to dwell with means to know her aspirations, her concerns, her dreams, her fears, know her. And that's communication. That's taking time to listen. I think being a good listener is so important, you know, and so many things. Those just a few things that come to my mind.
That's really good.
That's amazing. That's so helpful.
And I love the way, you know, you've really broken generational patterns of sin, even just in your upbringing. I mean, you didn't have a relationship with your biological father. Your mom married and divorced so many times. Yeah. And then to see what an incredible husband you are, what an incredible dad you are to Jonathan and to Christopher. And I don't know, there's a better grandfather out there, the way you love and are just so kind and consistent and show up in the lives of, you know, Stella and Lucy and Christopher. And it's just a beautiful thing to watch that. And of course, all the rest of your grandkids, I wasn't just playing favorites there, but it's just, it's a marvel to me because you didn't have a guide in that. So, you know, what helped you become the kind of father and grandfather you are without a pattern? Because you didn't have one.
Very good question.
Yeah.
I think that, you know, we have a generation today that so many of them are raised in broken homes. Blended families. I think there may be more blended families than what we call a nuclear family now. So it's a whole new thing. And so here's what I did. I came from a broken home, as you said, didn't know my biological father. My mom married and divorced 7 times. I came to Christ. I went out of my way to be around older people because, you know, I would hang around people my own age and I thought it's good, but, you know, what do they know? I mean, they don't know much more than I know. But these older folks, they've lived longer and they've walked with the Lord longer. And I've never seen a functioning marriage. I need to see what this looks like. I don't know what a dad looks like. I don't know what a grandfather looks like. I don't know anything. And so I would hang around people. I mean, it started with Chuck Smith and Kay Smith. I not only attended their church, I got to know them. I went on a little family vacation with them. I would go out to meals with them. So I saw them function in real life, not just at church. Then I became friends with a guy named Alan Redpath, who's a great Bible teacher, and his wife, Marjorie. And then later we became friends with Ruth and Billy Graham, spent a lot of time in their home. So just watching and observing people and what they do. And that is how I learned. I learned by finding, you know, father figures and mother figures to take the place of what I did not have. And so I think this is for us in the church who are older, my generation. We need to take time with younger people and help them. And it's a good word to younger people. Find older, godly people you can hang around with. I just gave a message. It's called What I Would Say to My Younger Self. Ooh. And one of the things I said to my younger self was, you know, find older people to be around, older, godly people, and spend time with them. And so I just made that very point because Paul says to Timothy, these things pass on to faithful men who will be able to teach others also. And Moses talked about, you know, when you're teaching your children, teach them when they rise up, when they lie down, at the table, driving in the car, wherever, weave it into life. And so I had to go out of my way to find godly people to fill the vacuum left by my mom and dad.
That's so good. I think even just what you said, you had to go out of your way. I think that a lot of young people looking for older people to pour into them, they're like, no one's reaching out to me. And so I don't have anyone, but it's like you had to go out of your way. I remember for me, I had to go out of my way and be a part of a small group that had seasoned older ladies in it. And I think that that's a word for younger people to not just wait for someone to reach out to you, but to take those steps and to go out of your way to make that happen. Because I mean, we all are in different seasons and we all have our lives that we're living. And I think sometimes we won't be aware of that. But I think this is such a great encouragement for older people to be aware of the younger people in their lives, to bring them along for the ride and the wisdom, but also for younger people to not just sit around waiting for older people to pour into them. And so I think that's such a good word for everyone in their seasons of life. Good insight. Yeah, I mean, actually, I don't recall really being invited. I think I kind of just invited myself. I come over. Yeah. Went up and started talking to them and hanging around with them. And we're going to lunch. Come on. I guess he's not going away. Come on, you know. And I just kind of, because I was persistent. Yeah. You know, I had to grow up fast, you know, because sometimes my mom wouldn't come home at night and I was just a little kid. I mean, really a young kid, like, you know, 8, 9 years old.
and I have to make my own dinner, get myself ready in the morning, get myself to school. So I kind of became, resourceful, and I learned how to fend for myself and kind of almost make a way for myself because no one was giving me anything.
Yeah, right.
And,
I mean, you talk about your mom would pass out drunk and you'd have to put her to bed and take care of her, right?
Pretty much every night. I mean, pass out completely unconscious drunk. So I'd put her in bed and then she'd wake up in the middle of the night. And for some reason, she liked fried egg sandwiches, make me a fried egg sandwich. I'd like 3:00 in the morning, I'm making her this fried egg sandwich. One time I made it for her and I took it and she threw the plate at me and it hit the wall. I said, that's it. No more fried egg sandwiches.
You're 9 years old?
Yeah, around there, maybe 11.
Wow, so you had to grow up fast.
I had to grow up fast, but so I just realized, it's weird. When I was 17, I felt older. And I felt like an adult in a way. I wasn't, but in other ways, maybe a little bit I was.
Yeah.
And so I just said, okay, I'm going to make up for lost time. First 17 years of my life, can't change that. But the rest of my life, I have something to say about that. We don't decide what hand we're dealt in life. We decide how we'll handle it.
Yes.
And we can use it as an excuse for bad behavior or laziness, or we can let that, that setback turn into a setup and that trial can turn into some kind of a triumph. I think we can make things better if we learn from them. We don't have to repeat the mistakes of our parents. Levi, you came and gave a message on this to our men's conference about the sins of the parents being visited on the children. We don't believe in some weird mystical generational curse, but we do believe that bad behavior can be repeated from father to son, and from that son who one day becomes a father to his son, or it can be broken through Christ, number one, but then changing those behavior patterns and changing what you do and how you live.
Yeah.
Yes.
Brilliant.
Yes.
Man, I just think when you're talking about, I was thinking about Clover. Clover's 9, our daughter, who of course, and to think about
I have a nickname for her.
Yes, you do. What is it?
I call her Clovey.
Always call her Clovey. She loves it. But to think about Clover having to shoulder that kind of responsibility and imagining her having to face that, like putting Jenny to bed drunk. I mean, which, it's only once or twice a week these days. I'm kidding.
Jokes.
But I mean, just for that to be on you. And then I know there was abuse and stuff with some of her boyfriends and but then you get saved, you're on your high school campus, you hear a preacher give a gospel message, and it was like radical salvation for you, right?
Yeah, it's almost like the Lord just set everything up. The normal pattern of people coming to Christ, and we all encourage people to do this. Share your faith, tell people about Jesus, invite them to church with you, etc. No one shared their faith with me. No one told me about Jesus. And I wanted someone to tell me about Jesus.
Wow.
But I wasn't going to walk up to a Christian and say, tell me about what you believe. But I remember I would hang around down by the pier in Newport Beach, little place called the Fun Zone. You've been there. Mm-hmm. Frankly, it hasn't changed since then. But I'd lean up against the wall, my hair hanging in my eyes, tough guy persona. And I remember the Christians would walk around with little, tracts, little gospel booklets. And they would come to me and I would take them, act as though I didn't care, and shove them in my pocket. But the reality is I never threw a single one away. Wow. So I would go home to my little tiny room, and I had a drawer, and I put all of these materials in this drawer. I later thought of it as my God drawer. I had things from Christians, from Mormons, from Jehovah's Witnesses, from Hare Krishna, all this religious literature. And every now and then I would take the drawer out, empty it on my bed, and literally sit there trying to figure it out. Like, How does this work? And I couldn't figure it out. I needed someone to tell me, but the Lord got through to me. And I was on my high school campus. I was literally on my way to make a drug buy because I heard someone was selling a certain kind of weed I wanted to buy. And as I'm walking across campus, I see this group of Christians sitting around singing songs. Now, I knew of them because a couple of them were former friends of mine that I went to elementary school with, so I couldn't write them all off as crazy people because I knew a couple of them. And then there was this really cute girl I'd met 2 days before that I wanted to talk to. And I noticed she was there, and I thought, well, she's into this, and my two friends are into this. Maybe I'll just sit down and hear what they think. And I sat far enough away where I could hear what was being said, but not so close where it would look like I was in their group. And I was just kind of watching them, and they're singing these songs about God. And I thought they're really weird. You know, they smile. I know they don't use drugs, because I used to party with some of them. I knew they didn't do that anymore. And but you know, and then just suddenly I tried a new thought on for size. What if they're right? What if it's all true? And I quickly dismissed that, like, no. And here's why I dismissed it. I was cynical because of the way I was raised. I was so disappointed in adults and in things that were said to me. I thought it's all a lie. You know, there is no happily ever after. There is no anything. But there was something in me that kind of was a buoyant hope in my life, even before I was a Christian. There was a sense in this little kid that things were going to somehow get better. So I tried that thought on again. What if it's true? That's not true. Then this guy gets up to speak. His name is Lonnie Frisbee. What a curious name. He's like, has a full beard, long hair. Honestly, he looked just like Jesus, at least the Jesus of the movies. Well, he kind of arrests my attention. Who's this guy? He's from off campus. He was from Calvary Chapel. I don't remember any of what he said, but I remember one statement. He said, Jesus said, you're for me or against me. It's kind of like a lightning bolt from heaven, just boom. And I looked at these Christians and I thought, well, I'm not one of them. Does that mean I'm against Jesus?
Yeah.
And I wasn't anti-Christ. Whenever I was in trouble, I called on Jesus, but that was the extent of it.
Wow.
And I thought, well, I don't want to be against Jesus. And if I'm not one of these people, am I against Jesus? They're clearly for him. And then Lonnie says, if you want to ask Christ to come into your life, get up and walk forward. And come here and I'll lead you in prayer. And some kids got up and walked forward. Remember, I'm a little bit further off. And I'm thinking, oh, there's no way I could do that. Next thing I knew, I was up there.
Wow.
I don't even know how I got up there. I don't even remember walking up there. I'm there. And I'm standing there and I pray this prayer. And after this prayer is done, a girl on my right is laughing with joy. A person on my left is crying, and I felt nothing. And I thought, it figures, it didn't work for me. There's that cynicism kicking in. But actually, that was the day Christ came into my life, and I started seeing immediate changes.
Wow. John, I mean, I don't care how many times I've heard that story. Heard you tell that so many times in so many parts of the country, but it's always tender every time, and it's beautiful. And it began for you not only a life of having been evangelized, but God quickly called you to be an evangelist. And it's incredible to see what God's done through you as you've preached all around the world and written 70 books. By the way, I was looking at the notes. Wow. You've written 70 books. That makes me exhausted just thinking about it.
I didn't say anyone read them. I just said I wrote them.
That's hilarious. Your newest, I do want to talk about this before we go. And I know you have to get on to your day. We're so grateful you would take some time to be with us. But Billy Graham, The Man I Knew, your newest release in your series of biographies that you've been in for a hot minute. You have a book on Steve McQueen. You have a book on Johnny Cash. And now you have this newest one, Billy Graham. So maybe tell us a little bit about, I know you had a personal relationship with him, and just kind of a little bit about the story of this book as well.
You know, when I was a kid, I lived for a time with my grandparents. I went to military school for a time, lived on campus, lived with aunts and uncles. But when I was with my grandparents, one thing we used to do was watch Billy Graham on TV. I remember it. As a little boy, he was there in black and white. And I remember liking him, but not really understanding what he was saying. How was I to know that later in life I would not only meet him, but become friends with him? Well, shortly after my conversion, I found myself out on the beaches of Newport talking to people about Jesus. And I even led some people to the Lord. And it was actually Chuck Smith who said to me for the first time, Greg, I believe God has called you to be an evangelist. Wow. I didn't even see that in myself, but Chuck saw it. And I didn't really even know much about what it meant to be an evangelist, except Billy Graham is the gold standard of evangelists. So early on in my ministry, I went and saw Billy preach in person. And then I met him briefly in the 80s. And then I started to get to know him in the 90s. I got to know his son, Franklin. Then I got to know Billy and Ruth. And then Billy asked me to join his board of directors, which I've been on for 25 years, maybe 30 years now. And I was there when Billy was still alive. And so Billy was sort of coming to the end of his crusade ministry as I was just beginning my crusade ministry. I was in my late 30s. And Billy wanted help with illustrating his sermons, like reaching a younger generation. And so I was really up on that. I've always been a pop culture fan, aware of what's going on around me. And I understood what Billy was looking for.
You actually bought me my first iPhone. I don't know if you remember that.
No,
when it first came out in 2007, I had just been down there with you, and as a gift, you bought me and gave me my very first iPhone. We didn't even have AT&T here, which is the only carrier you could have. So I had to like install it in California, but bring it here illegally. It was the whole thing. But yes, you have always led the pace in culture. And I think you were the first pastor I ever saw putting TVs on screens on stage. You know, that was like a real edgy thing. Yeah, probably that would have been what, early 2000s, back when flat screens cost, you know, like an arm and a leg.
Yeah, that might have been 90s, but always controversial. We had some people leave our church. We don't go to church to watch TV. Well, it's just the image of the guy preaching. Anyway, we
could write a book, The Things People Have Left Our Church Over.
That's funny.
That's a whole podcast, isn't it?
Yes.
It sure is. Yes.
That would be an interesting one.
Yeah.
But here's the thing about Billy is Billy, even in his older years, was always willing to learn new things. Because Billy would ask me questions. I'd sit around with him and say, Greg, what do you think of this? And I'm thinking, who cares what I think of this? You're Billy Graham. Yeah. What do you think of this? Yeah, he'd say a few things. Then he'd come back, Greg, tell me what you think. But he really wanted to know. Billy was a lifelong learner. Mm-hmm. He was always wanting to learn new things and grow more. And he was interested in connecting to people. Very interesting, unusual man. You know, in his later years, when he was in his 70s, he's bringing in rock music. Now, rock music is, you know, normal in events now, but for Billy Graham to bring rock music in, that was innovative.
To have Johnny Cash at a crusade
Exactly. But that was Billy, always willing to connect with people. So I just wanted to, you know, there's a lot of books on Billy, right? So this is just another book. But so I felt like his story has been told. I want to tell his story differently. I want to show the human side. I want to show the humor. I want to show what I perceived as coolness. I thought Billy was a really cool person. And by cool, I don't define it like Billy walked around on, you know, black leather jackets or something. He was cool because he was an American original. There was no one really like him. And he was comfortable in his own skin. And he was an innovator. And he was a risk taker, even in the later years of his life. So that to me is cool. And I also wanted to talk about the younger Billy more. A lot of people don't know about the young prankster Billy, fun-loving Billy. They only think of him as the stately elder statesman Billy, which he became, like a patriarchal figure. But he was a fun-loving young guy.
Well, and even the photo you put on the cover of him in this airplane with the Ray-Bans on, he just looks so cool, honestly. And I mean, that's a side of him that you had the luxury of getting access to. I mean, what's just wild. I mean, I just came across that he was friends with Werner von Braun of the Apollo program. It's just and then he's buddies with Walt Disney. And I mean, just the amount of people that he was friends with is unbelievable.
Well, it's unbelievable. He was friends with Johnny Cash. He was friends with Bono. Muhammad Ali came over to his house for a meal. He had a relationship with every president, from President Eisenhower arguably to President Trump, because Trump was at Billy's 95th birthday party. I was there too. But Trump was, before he ran for the presidency, he knew every president from Eisenhower to Trump.
I mean, he was friends with Kennedy, super good friends, right?
Well, you know, he kind of was closer to Nixon. Okay. But when Kennedy was elected, he built a friendship with Kennedy. In fact, he told me an amazing story. I asked Billy, do you have any regrets in life? He says, yes. And he told me the story of when he was at the presidential prayer breakfast in Washington, D.C., when Kennedy was president. And after Billy spoke that day, the president said, Billy, I'd like you to drive over to the White House with me. I have something I want to talk to you about. Well, Billy had the flu. He said, Mr. President, I'm really sick. I'd hate to get you sick. I'll be back in town in like a week. How about if we get together then? The president said that would be fine. Shortly after that, President Kennedy went to Dallas, where tragically he was assassinated. And Billy says, I regret that I didn't go back to the White House with him. I always wondered what he wanted to talk to me about.
Wow.
But, you know, the thing that was interesting, because when I was around Billy, it was like a perpetual interview. He probably drove him nuts. I couldn't stop asking him questions because I'm thinking he's Mr. History. And he was very guarded in what he would say about personal conversations with famous people, especially presidents. So it was hard getting that information out of him. But what I did get out of him, I put in this book because it just shows that here's a man that can have a conversation and a relationship with a believer and an unbeliever, with a Republican and a Democrat.
Yeah.
He had relationships with both presidents on both sides of the political aisle. He was very close to Johnson and Clinton, and he was close with Reagan and Bush. I think we need someone out there that's like that today.
Yeah, he was good friends with President Obama as well, right? Even at the very end.
Yeah, President Obama came to visit Billy at his home in Montreat. So I think people saw a Christ likeness in him.
Yeah.
They saw that he would keep their confidence and he would give them counsel from Scripture. Great qualities.
Oh, man.
So
well, we got to get you on your way. But last but not least, coming up here in October, you are returning to the Angel Stadium on October 3rd for Harvest Crusade. Anything you want to tell people about that listening who are maybe in California or around the country who can join in online?
Sure. Yeah. Go to harvest.org. And normally we do 3-night events, but because of COVID, we weren't going to even have an event this year, but we just decided kind of on a fluke, but I believe the Lord was directing us. We were able to secure the venue on October 3rd with special musical guests for King and Country and Phil Wickham. And then I'll give a gospel presentation. So no matter where you are in the nation, you can go to harvest.org. We'll have a live webcast of it. It will go out on television, radio, every platform we can put it on, YouTube, at our website, and other people's social media pages simultaneously. So just mark that date and pray for us, because, you know, I think that the real need in America today is for the gospel.
Yes.
Yeah, great. You got Phil Wickham and for King and Country there with you. Looks like 7:00 Pacific. So that's October 3rd.
Right.
Well, Greg, you're the best. We love you. We'll have to have you back because we hardly even scratched the surface on the amazing amount of things we could talk about. We'll have to do one with your wife as well.
That would be fun.
And let's do that podcast on why people leave churches for lame reasons.
Yeah, very good. That'll be very popular with the disgruntled folks.
Oh,
all right. Hey, Greg, we love you so much.
Love you.
Love you too. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. And be sure to swing by LeviLusko.com to see what's going on in our world, and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. In the meantime, we would love to connect with you on social media. Jenny and Levi Lusko, out.